You ever sit alone at night and wonder why the person you gave everything to suddenly treats you like a stranger? You gave them your time, your energy, your heart. You answered their late-night calls. You forgave things they never apologized for. You tried, harder than they ever knew, and all they did was pull away, a little more each day, until you felt like you were loving someone who didn't even remember how to hold you. They didn't say goodbye. They just stopped trying. And you? You waited. You told yourself maybe they're busy. Maybe they're confused. Maybe they just need space. So you waited. You watched them online, but they didn't watch you back. You typed and deleted messages, telling yourself it's not the right time. You tried to be strong, but inside you were slowly breaking. And then one day, it just stopped. Not the pain, that was still there, but the part of you that kept chasing, that part collapsed. You didn't even make a decision. It just happened. Like your heart finally got tired of screaming into silence. Like your soul whispered, enough. You didn't post about it. You didn't block them. You didn't make a scene. You just disconnected. Quietly, softly, completely. And something strange happened. The energy shifted. Suddenly they watched your stories again. They liked an old post. They messaged you late one night, out of nowhere, pretending like they didn't disappear. And you realized something. It wasn't you who was never enough. It was them who only notices when you're gone. This video isn't about revenge. It's not about games. It's about that quiet, sacred moment when you stop caring and something inside you begins to heal. We're going to talk about why that moment flips everything, why your silence speaks louder than every word you ever said, and how, through the wisdom of Stoic philosophy, you can find peace, not pain, in letting go. And before we dive in, if you feel even a little of what I just said, I want you to pause and drop this in the comments. I didn't lose them. I found me. Because what you're about to learn isn't just about them. It's about who you become when you finally stop caring. Let's get started. Number 1, indifference is power, not punishment. You didn't stop caring overnight. You stopped because you were tired. Tired of giving and getting nothing back. Tired of repeating yourself. Tired of pretending like you were okay with the bare minimum. You used to overthink every little thing. You'd wait hours just to see if they saw your message. You'd break your own heart making excuses for their silence. You called it love, but really, it was self-neglect. You gave them chances, even they knew they didn't deserve, and they got used to it. They started to believe you'd never leave. They thought your loyalty was weakness. They thought your love had no limit. But something shifted, didn't it? One morning you woke up, and it just didn't hit the same. The craving to hear from them was still there, but it didn't control you anymore. You didn't check their last scene. You didn't refresh their profile. You just sat with yourself. And in that silence, something powerful was born. You realized caring too much was hurting you more than they ever could. You realized the more you chased them, the further you ran from yourself. The Stoics called this freedom, the moment you stop depending on external things for your peace. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and it is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And what's more out of your control than someone else's love? Their effort, their words? You stopped caring, not because you became cold, but because you got tired of burning alone. Your indifference isn't revenge, it's recovery. It's how your soul finally took its power back. And here's the secret they never expected. Your silence hurts them more than your anger ever did. When you stopped reacting, they lost control. When you stopped begging, they started wondering. When you stopped chasing, they finally felt your absence. because caring loudly never shook them, but your peace. That's what made them panic. Number 2, you lose your power the moment you beg to be loved. They didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because they knew you thought they were more than enough. And they used that. They knew you'd wait. They knew you'd text again. They knew that no matter how cold they became, you'd come closer just to feel a little warmth. And so you begged, not in words maybe, but in actions. You stayed available. You broke your own rules. You said, "It's okay, I understand," when deep down you were breaking. You confused your silence for strength, but inside you were screaming. You called it loyalty, but what it really was fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being chosen, fear of realizing that the one you loved never really chose you back. You thought if you just held on tighter, they'd see your worth. You thought your patience would make them stay. But let me tell you something they didn't. Begging doesn't make them stay. It just tells them they can leave again and again, and you'll still be there. Because people don't respect what's always available. People don't value what they didn't earn. And love that has to be begged for will never feel safe, never feel whole, never feel like home. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus said, "Never depend on the admiration of others. There is no strength in it. Personal merit cannot be derived from an external source." Translation? The moment your worth depends on their affection, you've already given your power away. You can't force someone to love you the way you love them, and you shouldn't try. Because the truth is, if they didn't see your value when you gave your best, they never will when you start chasing. Begging to be loved is like watering dead soil. You pour your heart into something that cannot grow. You lose your sense of dignity trying to make someone stay who never wanted to build a future with you. And the saddest part, you start shrinking. You become smaller and quieter and softer, hoping that maybe this version of you will finally be enough for them to stay. But the moment you stop begging, something magical happens. You stop performing. You stop waiting. You stop explaining yourself to someone who already made their decision. And then you begin to remember who you were before they made you forget. That's real power. That's real healing. Write it in the comments if you feel it deep. I will never beg to be chosen. I already am enough. Number 3, spying on them only wounds you more. You said you wouldn't check. You promised yourself you'd let go. But there you are, 2 a.m., scrolling through their stories, checking their last scene, trying to decode if that post was about you. You watch how they smile in pictures like nothing ever happened, and a part of you aches, not because they moved on, but because they're not hurting like you are, and that breaks you a little more each night. You think maybe if you just keep watching, you'll find something, a sign they miss you, a hint of regret, something to make this pain feel less one-sided. But all you really find is emptiness. Because watching someone who doesn't care if you're watching only deepens the wound. You call it curiosity, but it's not. It's self-harm. Quiet, slow, invisible self-destruction. You're not checking to feel better. You're checking because you're still attached. Because a part of you is still waiting for them to wake up and come back. But here's the truth. People don't change just because you watch them. They don't feel your pain through a screen. They don't hear your silence like you hope they do. They move on at their pace, and the more you chase their shadow, the more you stay stuck in the past. The Stoics taught this over and over. Don't focus on what you can't control. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, stop trying to figure out who they are or who they should have been. Start focusing on who you are becoming. Your healing isn't in their profile. Your closure isn't in their pictures. Every time you open that app, you reopen a wound, and they'll never know how deeply it cuts. Let them go, not because they deserve peace, but because you do. You'll never move forward while looking back. You'll never feel whole if you keep peeking at the very person who broke you. And one day, when they realize you stopped watching, when they feel your absence, not just online, but in energy, that's when they'll feel it. That's when the silence gets loud. Number 4. Proving your worth only shows you forgot it. You told yourself you were done, but deep down, a voice kept whispering, one day they'll see what they lost. So you started showing up differently, posting more, smiling wider, dressing better, grinding harder. And every time you did something good, a part of you wondered if they saw it, if they felt it, if they regretted walking away. You weren't healing, you were performing, you weren't moving on, you were hoping they'd notice. And that's where you gave your power away again. You thought success would sting them, that if you looked strong, they'd come crawling back. But real strength isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about no longer needing their eyes to validate your shine. Because every time you try to make someone see your worth, what you're really saying is, you still have the power to define me. And they don't, not anymore. Not after what they did, not after how they left. The truth is, they didn't leave because you weren't good enough. They left because they couldn't recognize good when it was in front of them. You don't need to prove anything to someone who couldn't even appreciate your quiet loyalty, your softness, your presence. The moment you start to perform, you step out of alignment with your real self. And nothing built on performance ever lasts. Because if they come back, it won't be to love the real you. It'll be for the show. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." You don't need to prove anything. Be brave enough to stop performing. Be free enough to stop waiting for applause that never came when you needed it. You don't rise to impress. You rise to return to who you were before they made you feel invisible. And when they finally notice, when they finally realize what they walked away from, that's not your victory. That's just karma catching up. Your victory is peace. Your revenge is silence. Your power is not caring whether they saw it or not. Number 5, breaking no contact is breaking your own boundary. They haven't called, haven't checked in, haven't said sorry. Yet here you are, staring at your phone, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you should break the silence. Just to check if they're okay, just to remind them you still care, just to see if they miss you. But let's be honest, friend, who's really missing who? Because if they were thinking of you, they'd show it, they'd act. They wouldn't be silent while you suffer in it. You think maybe reaching out will bring closure or clarity, but the truth is, deep down, you just miss being heard, being seen, being wanted. And that's what makes no contact so hard. Not because you don't know better, but because you're still hoping. But here's what they're hoping: that you'll break, that you'll message, that you'll cave, because they're used to it. They know your heart. They know your softness. They know how many times you've forgiven, how many nights you stayed up thinking of them. But this time has to be different. Not for them, for you. Because every time you break no contact, you're not just opening the door to them, you're walking away from your healing. The Stoics would say, hold the line. Epictetus reminded us, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, silence is not weakness. It's discipline, it's power. It's the quiet decision to put yourself first, even when your heart screams otherwise. No contact isn't punishment. It's not revenge. It's the moment you finally say, I love you, but I love me more. It's how you teach people that you are not a revolving door, that your worth is not measured by how quickly you respond, but how firmly you protect your peace. And if they really cared, if they truly valued what they had, they'd come correct, with clarity, with consistency, with change. Until then, don't you dare break your own boundary just to remind someone else you exist. You are not forgotten. You are healing. Say this in the comments if you're holding the line with love. I protect my peace. My silence is my power. Number 6. Stop explaining yourself to someone who already decided not to understand. You've gone over it in your head 1,000 times. Maybe if you just explain it better. Maybe if you say how much it hurt. Maybe if they just knew how hard you tried, they'd finally understand. But they won't, because they already made up their mind. They chose distance. They chose silence. They chose to look away when you were right there, breaking in front of them, and no amount of explaining will fix a heart that's closed. You send long texts they never respond to. You try to be calm, respectful, patient. You say, I'm not angry, I just want to talk. But deep down you are angry, not just at them, but at yourself, for trying so hard to get clarity from someone who was never listening in the first place. Explaining yourself to someone who doesn't care is like screaming into the wind. It drains you. It humiliates you. It makes you question your truth just because they don't accept it. But your truth doesn't need their approval to be real. You were there. You gave. You tried. You know what you felt. And that's enough. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you loved, for how deeply you felt, for how long you stayed loyal when it would have been easier to leave. You already lived your truth. Stop rewriting it for someone who didn't even bother to read it the first time. From now on, let your peace be your explanation. Let your silence be your closure. Let your calm be the final word. Drop this in the comments if you're ready to stop explaining your worth. I don't explain myself to people who chose not to see me. Number 7. Your worth was never theirs to measure. You sit there wondering if they ever think about you, if they ever realized what they had. You rewind memories, reread conversations, trying to find that one moment when things shifted, when your love started feeling like too much. You tell yourself, maybe if they saw how much I've changed, maybe if they hear how I'm healing, maybe then they'll value me. But why are you still waiting for them to define what you were always born with? Your worth didn't start the day they loved you, and it didn't end the day they left. It was always there, in your kindness, in your patience, in the way you stayed loyal when they gave up. They just couldn't see it. Not because it wasn't real, but because they weren't ready for someone real. And now, every time you look for validation in their silence, every time you replay the pain just to find your value, you abandon yourself all over again. The Stoics never measured value by others. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." That means stop dressing yourself in other people's opinions. Stop letting someone's absence become the mirror you judge your beauty in. They didn't respond. That doesn't mean you don't matter. They didn't fight for you. That doesn't mean you weren't worth fighting for. Their inability to recognize you has nothing to do with your ability to shine. You were not too much. You were not too emotional. You were just more present than they knew how to handle. And your healing begins the day you stop asking them to reflect back a truth you already carry inside you. Stand in front of your mirror and ask yourself, do I love me? If the answer is yes, you've already won. If not, it's time to rebuild that love from the ground up without needing a single word from them. Number 8. The moment you stop caring, their ego begins to crack. They didn't expect you to stop. They expected you to wait, to check in, to keep wondering, because that's what you always did. You forgave without apology. You reached out without reason. You loved even when it hurt. And they counted on that. They relied on your care like it was something they deserved, not something you chose. But then, something in you went quiet. You stopped reacting. You stopped explaining. You stopped needing answers. You stopped asking if they missed you. And that silence? That's what started to echo in their mind louder than any message you ever sent. At first, they thought you were playing a game. They waited for the text that never came, the story view that didn't show up, the like that never landed, and when nothing happened, they felt it. That loss they thought they'd never feel, not because you left, but because you didn't chase. They never feared losing you when they had you, but now that you're gone and not looking back, their ego begins to crack, because ego feeds off attention and silence starves it. The Stoics didn't chase closure, they embodied it. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That means the most powerful thing you can do isn't to shout or prove or beg. It's to stay calm, stay grounded, and stay gone. Not because you're punishing them, but because you finally remembered your own worth. When you stop caring, you stop leaking energy. You stop being controlled by their silence, their posts, their moods. You walk away not with bitterness, but with boundaries. And that's when they start to notice. Not because they miss you, but because they can't believe they don't own your emotions anymore. You're not just gone from their life, you're gone from their grip. They thought you'd always be there, that your heart was a place they could walk in and out of whenever they pleased. And for a while, you let them, not because you were weak, but because you loved deeply, because you believed in their better version, even when they gave you every reason not to. You stayed through silence, through indifference, through confusion. You showed up when they didn't even notice. And they mistook your kindness for dependence, your patience for desperation, your loyalty for weakness. But you're not that version of you anymore. You've changed. You've bled quietly enough times to finally learn. Love is not supposed to hurt this much. Connection should never make you feel unseen. And healing doesn't begin when they come back. Healing begins when you do. The truth? They may have broken your heart, but they didn't break your soul. That sacred part of you, the one that still dreams, still loves, still hopes, is still alive, still yours. And you're not who they left. You're not the person they walked away from. You're who rose from that heartbreak with deeper clarity, deeper strength, deeper silence. So let them wonder. Let them miss you in rooms you'll never return to. Let them feel the absence they created. Because this version of you doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't break. This version of you rebuilds. You've come this far, and that means something. It means you're not here to stay broken. You're here to rise, not louder, but clearer, not bitter, but braver. The person you loved may never say sorry. They may never understand what they lost, but that no longer matters. Because you're done waiting for someone else to validate what you've always known inside. You are enough, always were. Now I want you to tell me in the comments, which of these 8 truths hit you the hardest? And drop this final affirmation if you're ready to move forward. This breakup didn't break me, it woke me up. If this video spoke to your soul like it did to mine while writing it, like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, for you, for your next chapter, for the version of you who never begs to be seen again.